Okay, folks, I'd like to welcome you back to the life and times of Crazy Patrick. I promised you this morning I was going to get into part 2 of El Chato's treasure. I decided we're going to have a little fireside chat tonight. You're not going to get to look at me. I'm pretty sure you're pretty sick of looking at me. So we're going to watch a fire tonight while I tell you this story. This story takes place after the last story. This story starts just prior to World War II and ends just after World War II. Now, I'm not going to give any last names. I'm just going to use first names. So, the way this story goes, there was this young man named Arthur. And he was up by Magdalena, New Mexico in the fall of the year. And he was deer hunting. And while he's out there hunting, he run into this older gentleman named Ben. And they struck up a conversation, and they kind of hit it off. And they decided that they was going to go ahead and hunt together and camp together. And they were sitting around the campfire at night, just kind of like this, watching the campfire. There's a lot of treasure tales in New Mexico, and so they started talking about all these lost treasures in New Mexico. And pretty soon Ben asked Arthur, he says, have you ever heard about El Chato's treasure? Well, Arthur said, yeah, I've heard about it. And he relays back, what he had heard about it. And Ben says, yeah, that's the right story. But everybody has a location wrong. And he said, he explains to Arthur, that he thinks that he's found this place. And so he related to Arthur that he had this mining claim in the Oregon Mountains, and he had been needing meat, and so he decided to come down in the Doñana Mountains and try to get a deer. And he had shot this deer, and unfortunately he didn't kill it. He just wounded it, and he was tracking this deer, following the blood trail, and finally he just got so tired he gave up and he sat down. And he's sitting there looking around, and he's thinking about things are starting to look kind of familiar for some reason. And he remembers this story of El Chato when he was confessing to the priest before his execution, that he was telling the priest that this place where he had hid the treasure, there was 3 peaks that stood out in a perfect line. And so he's looking there and he's going, well, man, there's 3 peaks. They stand out in a perfect line. And down in this arroyo, there was supposed to be a spring. So he kind of starts getting excited. He gets up and he starts looking around, and he finds his spring. And not too far from this spring, there was supposed to be this cave. And he gets to looking around, and he sees this depression in the ground that just doesn't look right. It doesn't look natural. It looks like something that had been filled in. So he gets pretty excited, and he goes back to his claim there in the Oregon Mountains. He gathers up all his belongings, all his supplies, and he comes back down to the Doñanas to do some more research and see what he can find. Well, he starts digging out this depression, starts mucking it out. And wasn't long, he came to solid rock. And he's going, well, that's weird. So he starts cleaning this rock off, and cleaning it off, and he sees these signs that are chiseled into this rock. You know, some kind of weird signs that have been chiseled in. So he gets that rock out of the way. He keeps mucking down and going down. He ends up finding a old Spanish coin. It wasn't silver, but it was an old Spanish coin. Oh Lord. The wind's starting to blow and ashes are starting to blow off my fire. I hope I don't have to put it out. But he keeps digging down, and he finds this old Spanish mining tool. It's like a pick on one side and an axe on the other. And so he keeps going. And he's explaining all this to Arthur. And he says, how would you like to come to this place and check it out with me? Well, Arthur, a young guy, he's going, heck yeah. So I'm going to stop this right now for a minute because I need to check my fire, and I'll be right back. Alrighty, folks, back to the story. So Arthur, he's, yeah, you know, so they made arrangements to meet in Las Cruces. So they met up in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and the story goes that they drove out to the village of Doñana. They went under the railroad tracks that are the same now as they were back then. And they drove his car that they had. I don't know what kind of car it was, but they drove it up into the Doñanas as far as they could go. And then they had to get out and walk. And they walked a long way, and they finally came to this place that Ben had been working on. Came to this hole in the ground. It went down to well over a man's height, and there was a cave that went down in the ground at an angle. So they got down in there and they was going down in this cave, and pretty soon they came to the place where the cave split. There was a fork to the left, a fork to the right. So Arthur decided, well, he'd go down this one fork. So he went down in there, and the cave started getting a little tighter, and pretty soon he's crawling on his belly, and he finally gets down in there where it starts getting a little too tight, and he's scared he's going to get stuck. So he comes back up. There was nothing that he could see down there. But so that's as far as Ben had actually mucked it out, I guess. So they split. They split ways, and so Arthur was really intrigued with his story. But World War II broke out, and he ended up having to go in the service. He ended up in the Army Air Corps, and thank God he made it through the war. And when he got back from the war, he's been thinking about this the whole time, like anybody would. So he decides he's going to go up to Magdalena and see if Ben Brown's still there. So he goes up there, and he'd been to Ben's place before up there in Magdalena, this old, pretty rustic, not very well kept cabin. And when he gets up there this time, he pulls up in the yard, and this place is all fixed up. There's a new vehicle sitting in the yard, and last time he was there, there's no no electricity, no running water, no modern conveniences. He goes up, he knocks on the door, and Ben comes to the door, invites him in, and he looks around and inside, and there's a new refrigerator, a new stove, indoor plumbing, running water. And he looks up there on the mantle and he sees this old Spanish mining tool sitting up on the mantle of the fireplace. And so he asked Ben, he goes, "Well, Ben, I guess you found El Chato's treasure." And Ben told him, "No, I never did get back there and was never able to finish what I'd started there." And he starts explaining to him that he had been prospecting down around Socorro, New Mexico, and he run into this mineral that was real valuable. He was using it for hardening steel, and steel was in high demand in World War II, and they needed this, and he found a whole mountain of it, and he ended up selling his claim to some big corporation, and he had more money than he's ever going to use the rest of his life, and so he was perfectly content. So that's kind of the end of this story. Nobody knows, did Ben ever go back and finish this operation he had going in the Doñanas after El Chato's treasure? Nobody knows. Is it still there? I believe it's still there. But that's for another story, folks. This is going to come up for chapter 3 of this story, where myself and one of my very best friends have hunted for this treasure, and I'm going to let you know what we found, and we're going to leave it at that. So right now, I want to tell you, good night, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite, and I will catch you on the flip-flop.